This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 63. Welcome to the 63rd episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. If you've been enjoying the show, I would love it if you take a moment to leave a rating and a review on iTunes. I read all of the reviews that you leave, and I really appreciate you taking the time to let me know how I'm doing. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please stop by the show notes page and leave a comment. You'll find all the episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. And also this year, I'm actually opening up my schedule to see clients. So if you're interested in learning about the fertility awareness method and you want someone to walk you through the basics of charting and help you gain confidence interpreting your charts and learning how to use the method for birth control or to try to get pregnant, you're in the right place. So shoot me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com and we'll set up a free 15-minute consultation to figure out if we're a good fit to work together. So in today's show, I'm really excited to have one of my previous guests back. And so if you didn't catch episode 21 with Holly Grigg-Spall, make sure to go back and have a listen. Holly is the author of the book Sweetening the Pill, or How We Got Hooked on Hormonal Contraceptives. And the episode that we did together was really enlightening for me, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, because we talked about a lot of the unexpected effects of the birth control pill, things that you wouldn't normally think of. And so if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. And, you know, in today's episode, we're not going to go into all the depth about her own experience. So if you're curious about what Holly's experience was on the pill, then definitely go back and take a listen. So in today's show, we'll be talking about something different. Holly's latest project is as an ambassador for is it Daysy? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Daysy.
Daysy and Lady Comp. And so we'll be delving into the implications of using tech for cycle tracking and why most fertility awareness educators, myself included, tend to have a lot of skepticism around those devices, especially the devices that have predictor technology. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Holly.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming back. We had a lot of fun on our first interview. I think both of us got a little bit, I don't know, whenever I talk about these topics, especially the birth control pill, I get quite animated.
Yeah, and I remember just learning an awful lot from you as well. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really great point. That's a really great point. So yes, go and listen to episode 21. Which episode are you on now then?
This one is 63.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because on the one hand, it seems like so many, but I've just kind of gotten into the habit of regularly doing my interviews. So as I see the numbers stock up, I'm like, man, I got to do like a summary episode coming up here soon.
Yeah, you should, like a best of.
Yeah. So I've said it on the podcast now, so I guess I'm committing to it. But yeah, so since you did talk a lot about your own story and your background in detail in our last episode, maybe you could just give the listeners tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, but especially what you've been up to lately and your new role with Daysy and Lady Comp.
Yeah, so if you listen to the episode, you'll hear about how I came off the pill after using it for 10 years and I started a blog. And that blog became several different newspaper articles and magazine articles, and then it became a book. And then that book got optioned, as they call it, by Ricki Lake and her partner, director partner, Abby Epstein, who made The Business of Being Born. And now they're actually well in production with the documentary that's inspired by my book, which actually had a Kickstarter campaign this last summer. I forget now when we talked, but I think all this has happened since.
Yes.
And so we raised like $130,000, I think it was, to get this film off the ground after nobody else wanted to fund it. So right now we're in production with that, which is great. And I was kind of in this position where I was like, well, what am I going to do next? Because it's a funny thing when you've written a book like I wrote, and I'll be totally honest. It's a controversial book, and it's not a book that like you can tell people about and they immediately get it, or they can look up on Google and immediately understand. And so I kind of almost painted myself into a corner, but a corner that I really like and I'm happy in a way. Which means I kind of had to build my career from that position where I was like, well, I need to work more in this area, but in a way that, obviously is sustainable, but in a way that interests me. And so I just started trying to figure out how to continue to help women in a way that I felt was kind of productive and practical and useful, and use my skills and what I'd learned from the book, marketing the book pretty much on my own, and then the Kickstarter campaign and all of that. And I ended up working for, and I think this is new to you as well, Elisa VT at Flow Living.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've worked with her for about a year now, and that's like been an amazing experience because it's like it's like I'm doing a lot of different kinds of work for her, mostly writing based, but it's like a comprehensive education in her expertise as well over the months. And then more recently, the company that is Valley Electronics, which has made Lady Comp, which has been around for I think almost 30 years now, and more recently the Daysy device, fertility monitor device, came out last year. They actually came on later on as the documentary as a sponsor, and they are very keen to see this film come out. But I got to know them a lot more because of what that process involved. And so I have actually taken on the role as you say, being an ambassador and kind of helping them get the word out about their newest device, the Daysy device, although I do sometimes work a little bit with Lady Comp as well. And that's been a really interesting personal evolution for me too, because when I came off the pill, I learned about fertility awareness, and it was really crucial to me gaining confidence in not using the pill. And it was really helpful and mind-blowing and amazing and empowering and all those things I'm sure everybody that you've spoken to previously has talked about. Mm-hmm. And but I did sometimes struggle to keep tracking, month to month as my life changed, as different things happened, and I was using condoms more and kind of just dropping it or only doing it half the months. And I think we actually talked about a little bit about that in that episode when I was trying to explain kind of how I think the book has been taken on it rightly in some ways as like a proponent of fertility awareness method, but it's something that I've personally kind of evolved over the years, trying to figure out how to make it work in my own life, as well as as a kind of accidental ambassador for the method. Ended up talking to a lot of women, especially people in the media, trying to convey what it is, why it's important, and in the end I came to like a baseline message that I always wanted to get out, which is that I think it's important for all women to know how to track their own fertility, even if they don't use it for contraception. And I think it's like a really important starting point. And so that's kind of where I got to with that. And then everything else came afterwards. So anyway, I think I've rambled about that enough. But so that's kind of the little potted evolution between the last episode and this one.
Yeah, well, I think that really gives the listeners a good sense of where you're coming from and kind of where you're at and how your career has kind of progressed, and also, you know what I mean, trying to find a place for yourself after writing such a powerful but, like you said, very controversial book. I could totally see what you mean when you say you're painting yourself in the corner, meaning that it's like, hi, I have other interests as well, and there's more than just this to my life. So one of the things for the listeners who maybe have never even heard of Lady Comp or Daysy, maybe you could talk a little bit about what it is. And I didn't even know it had been around for 30 years.
Yeah, well, Lady Comp was actually created by he's a PhD in economics, I believe, in Germany, and because he essentially didn't want his wife to use the pill. And this was about 30 years ago. I think it was maybe 29 years ago. And he was very, very suspicious of the pill and the side effects. And so he developed Lady Comp. A Lady Comp's like one of the most successful fertility monitoring devices in Europe, if not worldwide. It's been around for a very long time, and his daughter, Natalie, just has worked with him. She has a really interesting personal journey. She used the pill and she had an IUD, and then she came eventually back to use the Lady Comp, even though her father invented the Lady Comp. And then last year they decided to come out with the Daysy, which is based on exactly the same technology as the Lady Comp. It's just smaller, more kind of elegant and modern, but it's also something that you can use in conjunction with an app where you can track other signs like cervical fluid and anything else that you want to, and you can kind of view your chart. You can also send it to people for analyses, or you can share it with your doctor. Whereas with the Lady Comp, everything is in the device. So it kind of was evolved as a new piece of technology, but with an app as well. So to kind of align itself with, as we've seen, like the exponential rise of the period tracker apps, right, or the fertility awareness support apps. Mm-hmm. But with the fact that you have the device which you can use on its own, or you can attach to this. So it's essentially. It's like we call it it's like a fertility computer is really what makes the most sense. It's algorithm based. So Lady Comp and the Daysy are based on this same technology. It's analysis of, I think, something like 5 million cycles that they've come up with this algorithm. And the thing is that makes it different, which is why I put my support behind it in comparison to, all the new technology that's coming out. And we'll have to talk about some of the amazing things that you see, going for Kickstarter campaigns and like that and that kind of thing, which are just fascinating to me. But it's actually these, Daysy and Lady Comp are certified medical devices. They are certified medical devices in Europe, which means they have quite high standards. And they have been independently, clinically trialed for what they are claiming that they can do with the level of accuracy that they're claiming. So that, made a big difference to me. And, one of the things that I found when I learned about the Daysy, and I always knew slightly about the Lady Comp, was that I can't remember when I got my Daysy. I think this was probably early, it must have been maybe February, March last year. And I started using it and I realized, oh, well, this actually makes more sense for me in my life at this point. I had the foundation already of fertility awareness understanding. I'd kind of gone through the different stages of that and read different books and talked about it and, got comfortable with it. And then I came to this and found that it really worked for me. But yeah, it's interesting because where it fits in the kind of more the technological landscape that a lot of people will be becoming more aware of is that basically it's not new technology in that, it has this longer pedigree. And obviously it's one of the few devices, newer kind of technological devices that have actually come out. We've got a lot of different things that are being promised us in the last year, or that we've seen pop up in articles and things, but actually haven't come out yet. So it's that's where they're at with it, and the majority of women who use Daysy use it for avoiding pregnancy. I think with Lady Comp it's a little more evenly distributed for people who are using it to achieve pregnancy. There is a baby comp as well, which just reverses the technology.
So one of the questions I have, so obviously one of the reasons I was excited to have this conversation with you is because to be honest, I'm often very hesitant to kind of open this door of using tech.
Right.
Because I have a lot of very specific, as we'll get into, like a lot of very specific concerns and questions to tech. And so one of the questions that maybe you know more, obviously, than I know, you did describe that it's algorithm based. So let's say, I go and I buy the Lady Comp, and from what I understand, it's very expensive. It's like,
no, they are.
It's like
more expensive
$500 or something like that. So I buy my Lady Comp. I get it in the mail. It looks cute. I'm excited. I open it up. How does it know? Like, so at my very first cycle, how does it, like, So you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah,
how do
no,
you
it does.
start?
It
Because
doesn't.
it obviously
It
doesn't
doesn't.
know anything before I
No,
even. Okay. So then I
no.
have my
So
very first cycle,
yeah,
and then so I put in all my information.
yeah,
At what point does it start
no. Or well, what basically
knowing?
it's like it changes over time. Now, if you think when you learn fertility awareness charting, with an app or a pen and paper, right? You would never have a teacher tell you to start using it as your contraception right away, right? They'd say use condoms until you're comfortable with it and you understand how to read your charts, etc., right? And it's kind of similar because you say you come off the pill and you get the Daysy and you start using it. It depends on the person, but normally it's about 3 months before you will start getting more green days. Now, green days are the days that you get that signify that you're infertile. So you get the green light for infertile, the red light for fertile, and then the yellow is learning or not certain, right? So you should play it safe depending on what your goal is. So no, it isn't straight away, but the idea is that yes, it is reliable straight away because it's not going to tell you that you're not fertile when you might be fertile because it's going to say that it doesn't know or or it will just give you a red light. So so you will be waiting some time basically, which is why actually we're really interested in the idea of partnering with um, people like yourself, of fertility awareness educators, hormonal health experts, women's health coaches, to actually provide support along with the device. And I'd really like to see that for the company. I'd like to see the opportunity for people who find Daisy or find Lady Comp to be able to get that extra kind of support and care, either knowledge about your cycle and or understanding of hormonal balance issues and things like that. Because I think it's really important and it helps people to feel more comfortable and to use them more successfully. So, I think that's part of it for sure. But then, for a lot of people, they buy it, they use it for 3 months, and then they're good to go. And then for the rest of the time, they're using it, and it's giving them the uh, amount of green days that they would expect.
See, I think, yeah, I think that when it comes to, like, so for example, so if I were to pair with Lady Comp, which I probably wouldn't, to be honest, and part of the I have these two streams of thought in my head, and the one stream of thought is obviously there's a lot of women who want tech, they want it,
Yeah.
but part of the reason I would question, so one of the questions I would have is, are women wanting tech because they don't feel confident in their own abilities to actually learn their menstrual cycle, or have been trained by our society to believe that we need something external from ourselves to actually understand what's happening in our own bodies? I feel like that's one of the questions that I have when it comes to tech, which is very much like, because we live in this world where, like, you go to a doctor and any issue that you have, you're given the birth control pill, which is obviously an external factor that takes kind of away that understanding and control over what's happening. And in some ways, technology offers that. It offers another kind of way to be a bit more detached from our bodies.
I agree. And I think it's a very interesting point, but I think it's all to do with perspective too. And the
Yeah.
thing is I agree. I have, probably made statements like that in the past. I'm sure you can find articles and interviews I've done where I've said very similar things. But I kind of got to a point where I felt kind of frustrated by the fact that I want more than anything for all women to feel that they can come off the pill whenever they want to, immediately,
Yeah.
because they don't want to have these side effects anymore. Unfortunately, precisely because of that social training that you're talking about, which is needs to change absolutely, consciousness shift, everything. I'm all for it. right? But precisely because of that, they don't feel immediately comfortable. You explain to them, well, this is what you have to do. You check your cervical fluid and you take your temperature every day and all this kind of thing, right? And a lot of people have first of all, psychological barriers. They've never connected with their body in any way previously for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Social barriers too, yes. They don't get support from other people in their family, their partner, their doctor to do that, right, on their own. Yes, they don't perhaps trust themselves. That's absolutely an issue too. And also, maybe they feel like that's a big burden of responsibility if they're trying to not get pregnant. And they feel like they're going from taking a pill that they could say, well, if I got pregnant and the pill failed me, to it all being on their shoulders, right?
Yeah.
So if when I hear from women who choose the Daysy or the Lady Comp, and when I hear from women who use it, and these are often women who do check their cervical fluid too, as well, often women who have done that for several years. Many of them are coming at it from different places. Many of them use it as an access point to learn more about their body, actually. It's interesting. There's a lot of different points that people come to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming to it from a place where they are totally burdened by all those things, right?
Yeah.
But we can't push this evolution, and people need this now. They need to feel confident and comfortable with coming off the pill, that not using the IUD, whatever they don't want to be using, and they need to feel that now. If that means that they need something that makes it really easy for them, that gives them like a really simple feedback system, and even if that's the way that they take that and they use that as an access point to learn more about their bodies, which I think a lot of people do. I think it's like,
mm-hmm.
Oh, they suddenly realize, oh, that's so like, it's amazing how this works. That's really cool. And then they might fold in other things, right? They might start looking at their moods, or they might start looking at, different things that they want to eat at different times, and that kind of thing. Like they fold in other areas of body awareness and fertility awareness, and I agree. But at the same time, it's coming. I'm trying to. I'm actually, what I constantly hear in my head, which is really funny, is a review of my book from Vice, I think it was, and this reviewer liked my book, but she said that the author doesn't want to meet women where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, I talked about doing the charting that you're advocating for, which I have a lot of respect for 2 or 3 years. But I started to feel a bit hollow about it, because I was hitting these, it's like, and I would never not advocate for social change where, women feel much more in touch with their bodies and they're not scared of them and they trust themselves, and that we have more equal relationships, right, where people share responsibility. I'm always pushing for that, always. But at the same time, women need this now too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just aren't in the place that some of us are in.
What?
And that to me is really important. And it's kind of what I learned organically without really meaning to. Just talking to so many people about this and hearing what their questions were, and that's kind of where I come from it.
Well, I think that is a really interesting point, because I often joke that, say, my gateway drug into fertility awareness was Tony Weschler's book. And from what you're saying, of course, because tech is such a huge thing, because everyone's constantly on their phones, ever look up from your phone when you're walking around, like everyone's looking down at their phones. So what you're saying, there's a lot of validity to that. And if the Lady Comp can be kind of another woman's gateway drug into this world of fertility awareness, I think that for me, it would help me to kind of appreciate it as like a tool that could lead to a greater understanding of her body. Because I think my concerns sometimes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just to finish the thought, like, I feel like my concern sometimes about it is more like my nerdy sciencey self, because I see that particular tool as a version of the rhythm method, because it is, right? And it's a version of it. So like in it, and this is like it's like being like a weird purist hippie, right? Like I'm the fertility awareness purist hippie. I'm like the fertility awareness in the purest sense, especially coming from that place, that like that ethical place of like, I want it to work for everybody. Like I don't want women to get into this fertility awareness world and be told something and then have it not work for them. Right. And so then there's always like the fertility awareness.
Which is why I think, yeah.
Yeah. Like the fertility awareness educator concern is the very real issue of like, you know, when you're coming off the pill, your periods can be all over the place. Like you can go from having like a 50-day cycle to having like a 20-day cycle. So, and then also coming from that place of like, I'm not really sure how it works, but wanting to really have, in the best case, like best case scenario, having the woman to really appreciate that it's not about predicting and it's about observing every day. But at the same time, recognizing that that's a huge shift, just like you said. So that's a really good point, because coming off the pill and the mindset that comes with that, the set it and forget it, I get a lot of comments. I wrote a blog post, and it has been the blog post that has gotten the most hits. So it's, you know, 10 unexpected effects of coming off the birth control pill. And I started to get like a lot of comments on that post, and a lot of the comments I find to be very interesting. So, you know, I just came off the pill. My periods have been regular for 10 years, and now I'm scared that I'm off the pill and they're not regular. I hear that and I think, you haven't had a period for 10 years. But she doesn't know that.
No.
And so like you said, it's like you do have to meet women where they're at. We have been disconnected from our bodies. And I can appreciate what you're saying, that if this can be an entrance into this world, then yeah, like however you figure it out, like however you get introduced to this world of trying to understand your body, I'm like for it.
I agree. And I mean, there's a lot of different things you said there that are really interesting. One of them is, you know, you want it to work. Now, you know, it is algorithm based, but it is clinically tested. They have to recheck every single year under the EU laws that they can continue to claim it has the accuracy that it says it has, right?
And what accuracy does it say it has?
It's like 99.3, I want to say.
How is that possible? Okay, come on.
Yeah, 99.3.
How is that even possible with the device? The anti-device girl wants to know.
No, well, I seriously, and you know, it's not like, okay, a lot of the tech that's coming out, okay, so when we hear algorithm, right, you're thinking, oh, everybody has an algorithm, all these apps have an algorithm. Now they only have, the algorithm that they have is only based on what they've been able to develop. This is kind of not the most interesting part of it, so I'll be quick. So that's why they only have, so the data that they have is the only data they can work with, right? So if you had Ladycomp as the top selling fertility monitor device for, you know, as long as it has been, 28, 29 years, whatever it's been, can you imagine how much data has been fed through that, right?
Yeah.
And how many cycles, right?
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things, you know, that you were saying, I thought was interesting. They were talking about, well, you want it to work. Well, that's one side of it. But you want women to not be put off or kind of demoralized or feel like it's not right for them, right? Now, I think that is another side of it with, you know, there are some women who, like yourself, and I've done this in the past, who are totally going to love that kind of charting, right? The manual charting, as you called it. Basically, they're going to love it. It's going to work for them. They're going to really get into that.
Some are going to absolutely hate it, and it's not for them.
And drop it, and feel like they don't have any other option.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're absolutely right.
And they're going to drop it and feel like they don't have any other option. Or their life's going to change. They have a baby, they get a night shift job, they go and work at a bar, or they, you know, go through stressful times and drink more than they used to. Or do you know what I mean? I mean, we have to be honest about it. Like,
well, yeah, because there's not one thing for every woman. And so I do, like, So it's kind of like those conversations you have with yourself. I mean,
Mm.
I don't live in a vacuum, so I do appreciate that. I really do feel that those devices, like, they need to be there. They need to exist
Mm.
because there's definitely a population of women who want it. And I mean, part of why I do the show, and part of, like, everyone has their own voice, like everyone has their own little place in the world. And so I think that, one of the things that I always want to promote is, like, actually getting to that place of understanding your body and appreciating it, and, kind of not having to rely on the device. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of, like, it's like my, like, little ideal, I guess, in my head. And I know it's not for everybody, but it's kind of like that, like being able to have the freedom to not have to rely on anything, to actually have that appreciation for it. But at the same time, given that everyone's always attached to their phones, and
Hmm.
given that a lot of women come into this space with the understanding that the fertility awareness method is the rhythm method, and even if they kind of know that it's not, they still think it is. Right?
Yep.
Like, when you talk to women, it's like, oh, well, I ovulated on this day, so I usually ovulate on this day.
Hmm.
Oh, even if their chart is showing them that they're ovulating, like, on, say, the 12th day
Yeah.
after their period started, they're like, I couldn't possibly be ovulating this early because I never do, even though they are.
It's a mindset for
Yeah.
sure.
And so
Hmm.
these devices fit, like you said, where they're at.
It
And
does, yeah, it's interesting. And you know what you're saying there as well about, like, oh, I'd like people not to be dependent on anything. Now, a lot of people who are charting, even if they're charting signs manually, are doing so with an app, right?
yeah, I do with an app
So,
as well.
okay, so you don't have to use an app, right? But you
No.
are using an app.
Yeah. But the
So the thing
app,
is,
but I'll just put it out there. Of course, the caveat is that for me personally, and I don't use the predictor because I feel like the predictor settings on apps can screw you up.
oh, I know, but I think a lot of people, like,
They
maybe,
totally use them and they love
or
it.
at least they kind of look at it and go,
Yep.
oh, okay, because they want to know where they're going to be at
Yeah.
next month, right? They
Because
want
they
to
really
know.
buy into that rhythm method thinking, and I think it's like the thing as like from and it's just like you said at the beginning where you're like, it really depends on how you look at it. So I feel like a lot of listeners can benefit from this conversation because we're really, like, getting into the meat of this issue, right? And, like,
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
great.
challenging
And
those different perspectives. Because from the fertility awareness perspective, you're kind of like you're kind of thinking, like, that prediction stuff is where people get screwed up. And, like, if you follow, like, groups like fertility awareness groups on Facebook or whatever, like, you always see these, like, like, I should be ovulating on this day, or I don't know what's happening, or whatever. And, like, the fertility awareness educator in the back is like, look, go to the bathroom and check your
Mhm.
mucus. Check
Right.
it all day and you will have your answer, right?
Hmm.
Because
Well,
then the
yeah.
like the typical question is always like, well, how does the app know whether you have mucus or not? But there's a lot to be said for algorithms, and I don't comprehend. I can't. I'm not like I can't. I've watched a few TED Talks. Like, I can't comprehend the complexity of the computers, but I can't actually stand here and be like, the computer doesn't know anything. I know that
No,
because like, an algorithm is a word for a lot of people that doesn't mean anything,
right.
but the complexity of that kind of technology is something that a lot of us don't really appreciate or understand. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's probably more understandable to say it's research based on a certain number of cycles, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you're doing scientific research into anything to do with women's bodies, like, you would hopefully track women over a certain amount of time, right? So, this is the same thing where they fed in data from real women's, obviously, there aren't any other kind, cycles, right? And that's what the algorithm is. It's just research over time, essentially built up. That's what they do, right? So and then they just, they look for how what they're looking for in the cycles and the patterns and the intersections and things like that. But I think what's interesting is a lot of people come to it through period tracker apps, and I think we probably talked about period tracker apps last time.
Yeah.
Because that was, like you say, the whole rhythm method kind of mentality, and that's what I really struggled with, is like making people understand the difference between period tracker app and an app that you use to support like charting for yourself, right? That isn't a predictor and isn't just about when your period's going to arrive. And so, a lot of people are using those, and actually seems to have become something of a gateway to people being more interested in their periods. I mean, I think in the last, in 2015, we saw such a change and a shift in terms of how women talk about periods.
Yeah, it was a great year for periods. I saw a bunch
Yeah.
of really interesting articles.
I mean, it really was. And, now there's so many events about menstrual hygiene and so many events about, alternative products like cups and the Thinks pants and, all this stuff's going on, right? So things are changing. But, it's interesting, like I think it's just as like I say, in the end it comes down to what people are comfortable with, I think. And with the Daisy device, you don't have to attach it to an app. So, if you're just going day to day, it's just telling you day to day what your status is. Now, the thing is, I think that what you said before, that's what I was trying to remember what you said before that I found interesting. You're talking about set it and forget it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, that is obviously where we're going, I think we're at a point or a watershed moment where basically, yes, we're acknowledging that women don't necessarily want to use the pill, but where they're being pushed with money and advertising and corporate power and culturally and socially is towards set it and forget it.
IUD now.
IUDs,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
IUD is the savior. Probably, you've got programs already in schools that allow teenagers to have them for free
Without their parents' consent.
that, yes,
My God.
women who are impoverished being offered them for free.
The impoverished women thing makes my blood boil.
Oh, it's horrible. It's really upsetting because it's not being done in the right way or with
They
the right
probably don't even
intentions.
understand what's happening to them.
Or offering it to women after they've just given birth or just had an abortion. We're really at a point where that is what's going to happen, okay?
Eugenics.
And we kind of we
Can I
have
throw
to,
that out there? Like, it
yeah,
totally sounds like it for me. I
well,
hear that stuff and I'm like, you're going into countries where people are poor, where they probably need to have lots of kids because maybe there's a lot of issues around survival.
Mhm. Oh, well, that's a whole other conversation. But
Sorry.
yes,
Okay, dialing it back. Dialing it back.
absolutely, you are
Dialing
totally
back.
right. You're totally right. But yeah, that's a path we're going down. Like, I'm not. That's not being like dramatic. That's
Yeah,
seriously
it's happening.
it's happening right now. It's happening.
Yeah,
It's
that
happening
8-year
fast.
contraceptive device thing that Bill Gates is trying to put in all these
Yeah.
women's arms in like poor countries in Africa.
Yep.
Like, leave the Africans alone. Worry about your own country. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
No.
Dialing it back.
He is,
Dialing
he
it
is
back.
worried. He's worrying about his own. He's worrying about his bottom line.
Oh my God.
But like remote control, birth control, this is what we're heading towards, right? Okay, so we have to grasp that and understand that. And I did this. I've done this. Spent 6 years grasping and understanding that concept. What am I going to do in the face of that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm totally going to try and get women to be like comfortable with their periods to start with, for God's sake. Let's just get them that comfortable with that, right?
Yes.
To not hate their periods like they're not a part of themselves, right? To not like have this like absolute just like it's a horrible, awful thing feeling that makes like it's a detached alien thing. That's really great. Yeah, definitely going to do that. But also, I'm really going to want to put all my power and energy behind something that I think that actually mirrors that to an extent that people can say something is simple, convenient, easy to use, quick to use. It doesn't take too much of an effort for them to understand the transition from what they're used to this alternative that means that they don't have to go from the pill to the IUD if they don't want to. They don't have to think when they're on the IUD that there's no other option for them. And that happens to be technology, I think. And that's the way also it's going, that you have to, like, the pharmaceutical industry is putting all its money behind that. IUD, the set it and forget it, especially the hormonal IUDs.
Mm-hmm.
The only other money-wise power that we're getting is the technology for fertility, the fertility technology. So we've got all these things now, right, that we're hearing about that God knows if they'll ever even come out, who knows, but they're looking for money for the ring that you put in your vagina that's going to read your temperature internally, or the thing that you wear on your arm that's going to read your temperature overnight, or it's or the leaf thing that you wear around your neck and somehow magically reads your temperature all day long. And all these all these things that you can sell, right? The investment in them is huge. They obviously are going, well, can we take what the pharmaceutical industry is doing, right? And can we mirror it and meet that need, that desire to have completely convenient, easy, simple, doesn't really impact your life, can totally fit into your life, contraceptive method, or to meet people who are having trouble having children when they want to. And that's what's happening.
And I feel like the frustrating part about that, coming from this like totally different perspective, like it's so incredibly frustrating because these folks, these male folks, are like driving to find a way to sell stuff to women. Right? Like it's like this money making thing.
Well, a lot of the companies are run by men, or at least, they may have a female head, but their majority team are male.
Yeah. And the goal is, because ultimately, if you have a market and the market is women, and you have a product that like every single woman could use, that's a huge opportunity to make money. And I think that there's nothing wrong with making money, and there's nothing wrong with selling products that enrich people's lives and improve people's lives. But I always struggle with this, I always struggle with this idea of, these products that make women feel like we need, like, I'm not enough. Like, I need this. I need to buy this. I need to use this in order to deal with this problem of my fertility. So there's that, because your fertility is a problem. And then, like you said, it's like it's where we're at in our world. I mean, for young women, myself included, when I was young, like when I was in my teens and my early 20s, like it was like getting pregnant, was considered to be like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And you're like willing to do anything to like prevent that from happening. And that's because of the culture that we live in, right? And then all of a sudden it switches when you get to be whenever you decide you're ready to have kids, if you choose to have kids, and meanwhile someone was trying to sell you stuff to prevent you from getting pregnant and that person wasn't concerned about preserving your fertility at all.
No, and that's true, but it's interesting talking about, because it's kind of worse than that in a way. You're saying that, you can sell these things to women, everybody has to use them, you make a lot of money. Okay, but most people I know who are in like the manual charting, want to track their own basal body temperature, check the cervical fluid and track it all themselves, don't use predictors, use an app to help them. Most people these days I know don't use pen and paper alone.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that app might be free, right?
Yeah.
But how do you think that company makes money?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're telling so it's not just selling a product to women, because most women aren't buying a product, to be honest.
Yeah, they're
using a free app.
Yeah.
Now, common thing that's often said, if you aren't spending money on a product, you are the product. So that means that you are using something and feeding your data into it. Sure, it might be anonymized, but eventually that data is being sold. So who do you think it's being sold to in our current world? Yeah, sometimes it's maybe they're working with educational institutions or research centers, hopefully to better our understanding of women's health. But, we live in a patriarchal society that's misogynistic, doesn't really believe that women's bodies are made in the right way and sees them as faulty and lesser than the male ideal, right? So we're really hoping that research is for our benefit, right? But it's hard to get money to do that kind of research that we really want to see.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful if it's being done, but it's actually really hard to get that research off the ground. So that means most of the money that they're going to have to get to pay for what they're giving you for free, and so they can pay themselves and make a profit, and is to sell it to marketing companies and advertising companies, who are going to use the data for what? They're not going to use the data for our benefit, or to create a feminist society, or to make the world better for women. We can be sure of that, right? So that's pretty
Yeah.
certain. So, you need to just, if you do a little bit of digging into that, which I have done recently, and that was partly because I got the offer from Daisy to help them with the getting the word out about their device, and because it's basically one of the, and I don't use the app for this reason, even though I know that I can choose to keep my data private. I know that they don't have any business connections in that way. As you said, the products are pretty expensive, and that's one of the reasons why, because they're not making money off the data, is that you can use the device without using an app. So I know that the information stays on the device, right?
That's something that I've never considered. So I'm really glad
Yeah.
that you brought that up because that's
And that's one of the reasons that I felt so
insane.
well towards them, because that's one thing that I liked about it. And I know, like, I floated this idea a while ago online because I was really interested in what people thought about it. And it was obvious a lot of people never really thought about it. And
Yeah.
it was obvious that some people were totally horrified by it. And it was obvious that some people felt like, well, why does it matter if they're just going to like start marketing me nappies, right? When they know I'm pregnant. Or, whatever else, like
Well,
tampons, or,
Google does that. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, but like
right.
when I got pregnant and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this. I just assume that maybe it's because it's reading the words in my emails or looking at my searches. But for example, when I was like getting married, the advertisements are geared towards wedding stuff. And
Oh, yeah.
when I was pregnant, I was getting all kind like if you, I don't really pay attention, but peripheral vision, I would see all this baby stuff in the ads that come up, and when you go to websites, you see the baby stuff, the ads that come up. So arguably it's already happening, but from what you're saying, it sounds like so I use a free app and I input the data about my menstrual cycle, and then I have no idea how that data is being used, and it's being collected, and then it could be sold and used to direct market me, or even as a totally different thing, like for research.
No, it is being sold. If it's free, it's being sold. If you didn't pay for the app, and even if you did pay $2.99 for the app, it's being sold. And the thing that's even more worrying to me than that is the fact that you may originally get this app when it's a startup, right? And the company's a startup, it's small, it's trustworthy. You like what the blog says, you like the people, but eventually they're probably going to sell
Yeah, sell
if they get
something, of course.
successful enough,
Yeah.
right? That's everybody's aim. Nobody really, that's what you want to do, right? And you don't, and once they sell it, then whatever promises they've made to you are null. That's doesn't matter anymore. So, you're in a situation basically where, yeah, I mean, to me, that was a big thing. To me, and so some people it won't be, but to me, I mean, I've read enough studies into women's cycles when I was researching my book, and most of them aren't, because they're coming from a place where are in women's best interests. They're coming from a place where they're trying to figure out how women's cycles affect them and in what ways. And usually it's to either sell you something, or because they want to prove something that is already an assumption in our culture. Partly because science works within our own culture, right? So that's what they're looking to do usually, is prove an assumption that they may already have. And the thing is that, the apps that want more and more and more and more data from you, they're doing that, and they're saying, well, you can now track this and track that. And it all sounds really funky and cool, but they're doing that because the more data they have, the more money they make.
Wow. And so what you're saying then is that so the lady comp is a bit different because you can choose to use it without having that connection, and they won't necessarily, you can choose not to share your data for that.
The lady comp, yeah, most people don't even connect it to computer. The only reason you do that with the lady comp is if you wanted to share your charts with your doctor or something and print them out. But with the
But sorry, can
Daisy,
I just ask a question?
mm,
Because you we also talked about the algorithm, but so does the data still is the data collected for that reason?
no, that was, I mean, the no, the lady compass was developed for that reason, with the data to develop the actual device in itself. But with the Daisy, for example, so your private personal data, if you use the Daisy every day, you know, 7, 10 years or more, and you don't connect it to the app, then it just stays on the device.
Okay. And so that was
So,
one of the reasons why you felt
mm,
comfortable putting your support behind this company because you kind of can be confident as to what is being
yeah,
used, what your information is being used for.
yeah, and the Lady Comp is actually, I mean, the Daisy you can attach to the Daisy View app if you want to. And a lot of people do because they want to look at their cycle. They want to like be able to. A lot of people actually do like full manual fertility awareness, tracking everything alongside. You know, they do both. So people do that. The Lady Comp is a standalone device. You don't have an app that you use at
Okay.
all. But with the Daisy, I don't use the app. I just use the device. So it just all the data that I put into it stays on. There's no it's not Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. There's no way they can get into it or
Okay.
anybody can get into it at any point.
And just out of curiosity, so then what exactly do you put into it? Is it the same as like you put in your cervical mucus, your temperature, and your
For
cervical
the app,
position, or for
yeah,
the
yeah.
device? And
Oh
then
no,
it,
no. With the device, it's literally just your basal body temperature. But with the app, if you do connect with the USB to the app, then you can put in whatever you want to put in. But it's only, I think you can, I think it's like 5 or 6 different options. It's not like other apps that have, you know, that many options. It's yeah, cervical fluid, cervix position.
so with the Lady Comp and with the Daisy, then you it's only temperature.
Yes, that's the only thing that you're taking with the device. The rest you can add in yourself.
Wow. And then, so then, but if you use the Daisy with the app, then you can add in that additional. So it's informed
Yes,
by
and a lot
your
of people
temperature,
do. Yeah, it's
and
informed by your
that's it.
temperature. Mhm. But a lot of
Wow.
people yeah, and they actually did they took that and they compared it to women using it and doing their cervical fluid and it was no different. So,
So that's so
I don't know.
bizarre because then with the fertility, like the way it's taught, right? Cervical mucus is the most important sign, and then so
Yeah.
this is only using temperature. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, with what the studies that they did with it, because, you know, one of the reasons they developed the Daisy with the app is because there was a call for women wanting to have somewhere to track their cervical fluid. You do also get people who use the Daisy with other apps, by the
Yeah.
way.
Okay.
You know, like whatever else you want to use it with that you can track all those signs yourself, right? You do get people who do that as well. And then you get people who use the Daisy View app to track those signs too. And that was one of the reasons why. But yeah, I mean, from what I've heard and from what I've seen from surveys and things that we've done, a lot of women are aware of their cervical fluid changes, whether they track them or not. They definitely have awareness of it,
Mm-hmm.
who use the devices. But no, when that is only informed by basal body temperature, and they've done, you know, they've got these studies that show that they found that women preferred to use the device and not track it, which is why they only recently last year developed the Daisy with the app.
And that's
Yeah.
in response to all the interest
Which
and
makes sense, right? Which
yeah.
just goes back to what I was saying originally. Like women are finally getting to a point where they like are like menstrual cups. Oh, cool! I don't mind touching my own blood, right? So okay, we get them onto cervical fluid next.
Well, I think that that's a really good. I think that that kind of because I
I
know that
don't
a
mean to
few
sound
fertility
condescending.
awareness
That's how
educators
I'm
listen to
saying.
the podcast, and so I'm pretty sure at least one of them is thinking, why the heck is she talking about these tracking devices? Because coming from this world, it's all very skeptical, and again, it comes from that like I've talked about those different ideas, like the idea that it's not going to be accurate in every situation because how could it be? So that's coming from the fertility awareness perspective, right? Like the awareness educator and worrying that it's not going to work for women, and then the other like having to rely on an external device. And I think that you've really highlighted that this is something that is meeting women where they're at, And for some women, this would be their preference because it's a bit simpler. It doesn't require, like as much self-study, which the fertility awareness educators would argue is a downfall. But from what you're saying, if it offers women kind of an entrance into it, that leads them to learning more about their cycles, and also gives them another alternative instead of just going straight to the IUD. I think that I think that there's a place for these apps. Although I wouldn't say that I think that it's like the best choice because of my own personal opinions, right? We all have our own personal opinions, but I really respect that it can definitely be a way that women can. I mean, it's better than having to feel like you can only be on the pill. Women need more options.
Well, exactly, which is a really great point. And the thing is you think about the pill, like you have the pill, the hormonal IUD, the patch, the implant, etc., right? They're different methodologies or different, I can't remember. I always forget that word that you use. Anyway, different ways of using the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think for non-hormonal and for fertility awareness, we need the same thing in the same way that some people talk about Billings or Crichton or Justice method or symptothermal. I would love to see a point where, and I do know some people who are fertility awareness educators who have embraced technology, where it becomes part of the non-hormonal menu as far as fertility awareness educators are concerned, right? Yeah. So if you do meet a woman who comes to you wanting to chart and she struggles with it and it doesn't, you can tell it doesn't fit her life or her relationship, or her partner is pressuring her, or she, to go back on the pill, and he would be far more convinced by a piece of technology than anything else. Those kind of situations, it would be nice if from fertility awareness educator standpoint, that we could see it as like something on the menu that you could say to women, well, there's this thing that you can use if this isn't working out for you. Because I think there's a lot of reasons, and a lot of them aren't in women's own hands as well, as to why it doesn't work out for women. And it's not because they don't try. It's not because they really don't want to at all. And I think, that's important to acknowledge. And I think, like, just as we have all those different ways of doing the same, using hormonal birth control on one side, then this is like, another menu on the other side of the spectrum, basically. But and as you say, like, I'm all for helping women who, for whatever reason, really don't want to use the IUD as well and are under massive pressure right now to like accept the IUD, then to feel that they have something that is like what they're looking for more, where something they don't have to think about kind of mindset that they're in. And there are a lot of women like that, and a lot of women who are very educated and intelligent and capable and totally could do manual charting, who still don't want to do it.
Well, and I think it's easy.
Or can't.
Well, yeah, it's easy as someone who is kind of in this world, and obviously this stuff is not new to me. I've been doing this for like 13, 14 years, charting. Yeah. And like, I'm over it. Like in terms of the period stuff, I've been using the Diva Cup. I used the Diva Cup before there was a Diva Cup. I used the Keeper back in like 2000.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm over it. Like, touching my body and seeing my menstrual blood doesn't bother me. And I think that, I went through that whole like phase when I was like 19 or whatever, when I was, going to all these feminist talks and like, you know what I mean? Like empowered. And so I'm totally over it. Right.
That's brilliant,
and I think that comes with it. Like, you kind of forget that there are grown women that are totally grossed out by their vaginas. There are women who have never looked at their vaginas, women who would do anything not to have to touch their vagina, and, have never even used a tampon without an applicator, if they even use tampons.
Yep.
And would never even want to use a cup because that would be just too gross for them to And
not comfortable.
before we started recording, when I was talking to you about the interview that I did with Tony Weschler. So before the interview, we were talking about Tony Weschler, and I had told you that I had listened to an interview that she did on Dr. Oz. And, in that interview, his wife couldn't get past the idea of checking mucus. She thought it was like the most disgusting thing that she could even
Yeah.
imagine. And for me, I was sitting there like, you're a grown woman, you have like 4 kids. Like, what are we talking about here? And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, some women are just not, like, we just have to meet women where they're at.
Well, it
And the
sounds like you
society that we
like.
live in has done such a disservice for women to grow up hating their bodies so much, right? That they're totally disgusted by their periods, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and we are. And it sounds like you got a really great early start of like initiation into all of this, and
So
that's
I'm like
wonderful.
a
But
weirdo, and so
no, you're
I
a
don't
wonderful weirdo,
appreciate, I
though.
don't
Like,
remember sometimes, but I don't remember sometimes that like I'm really far out there with my comfort level compared to the
yeah,
average woman, right? Like I kind of forget
right,
that.
right. Whereas I was like, what? I was 27 when I came off the pill. And you come off, you've been on it for 10 years, you have a not very intimate relationship with your body, or very, you know how it can make you feel. You've probably heard a lot from other people, make you feel very detached. And you come off, and it's a wonderful thing to realize that you can't get pregnant every day of your cycle, and it's amazing knowledge to have, and it's amazing to know that cervical fluid isn't because of like a lot of teenagers do, like because you have an infection or you're dirty or and there's a lot
Hmm.
of horrible things people get taught by various different people in their lives. And yeah, no, it's absolutely right. And don't want, I mean, I just always hazard as well being condescending about it. And I because as I said before, it's not because they aren't intelligent, feminist, capable, strong, wise people at all. It's because we live in the world, and we live in this world, and this world, we all struggle with on a daily basis in a lot of different ways. When we look at a billboard or we read a magazine or we watch an advert, and who of us isn't like second guessing ourselves or saying like negative things to ourselves, or, comparing ourselves in different ways? It's, you don't live, we live in the world, and that's what it is. And so, as I said, right back in the beginning, the whole, for me, it just became about just really wanting to make sure that, um, women knew that they could just make a transition and make it now. And, I think with this, like we're talking about the psychological barriers and things like that, and, whether you, it would be wonderful if every single woman in the world got like comprehensive, what, like Emily Varnum, who they have a Kickstarter right now for this wonderful tour, the Fifth Vital Sign tour, where they're going to go across the country spreading comprehensive and like unbiased and amazing reproductive health information. Right? She came up with this idea of birth control doula. Right?
Mm.
It'd be wonderful if all women had like a birth control doula where they like got totally psychologically supported through the transitions between birth control methods, and all that kind of thing that women really need, but they don't. And that means that a lot of women come off the pill, find it, don't want to use condoms, their partner doesn't want to use condoms, I mean, and they
Yeah. And
struggle,
then they
and then
get
they go back,
acne, and then their
and then
periods
they
don't
get
come regularly,
Mhm.
and then they go back on the pill.
And they go back on, or they go back on because they're really scared of getting pregnant, or they do get pregnant, or they just think, well, I just have to have an IUD. I don't like it, but it's just what I have to do, and they feel really trapped. And I don't like women feeling trapped, and I don't really like feeling, the idea that anybody that isn't at that point, that we all want to be at, and we all should want to be at. And I think you and I want to be at this amazing, enlightened point where our society changes. And yeah, I'm absolutely for that. Like, I'm the
And
most
we're all like
revolution.
at one
I'm the
with our
most,
menstruation and
no,
like,
I'm the most revolutionary minded person you'll ever meet. I am on board. I am there. I will do anything for it. I will. But I also want women to have choices now, right? And choices that, as we said, meet them where they're at. Because otherwise, there's women suffering unnecessarily every single day. And women's not even suffering, just suffering unnecessarily. Women bloody dying, for God's sake, It's awful.
well, you know what, Holly? This is why I was actually really open and receptive and really excited to have this conversation with you, because I honestly feel like this type of conversation, because I'm not really, like I said, like I'm coming from a fertility awareness perspective. So there's not a lot of
Yeah.
people I would be interested in having this conversation with. To be honest with you, it's because it was you. And I know how, like, I mean, we had a conversation before. I've read your book. I know you think critically about these. And I thought, you know what, if Holly's behind this, I really want to find out, more. And I really I'm happy that you shared your perspective. And I just, I mean, I appreciate you for sharing that with me, because I feel like every time I do an interview, I feel like it does enrich me. It opens me to new ideas and it challenges me. And I really appreciate the conversation that we've had today, because obviously in my perfect world, every woman would be taught, not necessarily, like it's not about pushing fertility awareness on anybody, but every woman would be taught about their reproductive cycles. And they would be taught how to identify when they're fertile and when they're not. Not necessarily for the purpose of using a particular method, but just so that everyone can have that understanding. Because from having the experience of teaching, numerous numbers of women the fertility awareness method, a huge part of that process involves teaching women all of the biology behind their fertility, the biology behind their menstrual cycles. And when women learn that, it's this profound experience. And that is before they start using the method. So in my perfect world, every woman would have that opportunity, like you said, to have this, like, birth control doula is kind of separate to help them transition, but to have this knowledge of their cycle from young, from small. And then I wouldn't have such an issue with things like the lady comp. Right? Like I wouldn't have an issue, because then it would be like, it'd be a tool that you use, but you have the foundational knowledge. When you have that foundational knowledge, you can do everything, not everything, you can do anything that you want. Like, it's not about me saying like you have to practice the fertility awareness method at all, because you don't, or that you have to do it in a certain way, because you don't. But the biggest part of it for me is like, I really want everyone to know. And then from that point, we can all make informed choices. And I think that what you've highlighted to me is that this is another way, another option for women who really need options that are non-hormonal. And also it's another way for women to be exposed to it. And I really appreciate that, because it's certain things I wouldn't necessarily have thought about it that way.
Yeah, and just to chime in on that thought, I totally personally agree with that too. I think that is absolutely the ideal, and we should never stop trying to work towards that. I think, interestingly, the first time I met Natalie, the founder of Daysy, and who worked on Lady Comp with her father, and then Jesse's the COO here, in person, was, I think, December last year, early December, end of November last year. And this is what we were talking about. Because that's exactly what we all want, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's nobody I'm working with who's going, I want to keep women in the dark so that we can keep selling them this stuff.
So they'll be reliant on me forever, and they'll never learn about their stuff. Yeah.
No, actually, no, because they have daughters and they have do you know what they spend all day doing? Talking to women who've had horrible experiences on the pill.
Yeah.
And meeting people whose daughters have died using hormonal birth control, right? And so that they're not coming at it from that point, they're coming at it from the point of like, yes, please, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all taught this knowledge so we could come from this really super informed place and then get to make decisions, but still have everything accessible to us. And, whatever we wanted to do, we could do.
Well, then maybe I'll have to really kind of think about the level of skepticism that I often have. I often have a certain degree of skepticism when it comes to ovulation tracking devices and just devices in general, because I often come from that. Well, not often. I come from that perspective that, in a way, it discourages women from having that connection with their bodies. But from a different perspective, it could be the thing that actually allows a woman to connect with it, because that is where she's at and that's what she's comfortable with today. And then maybe, in 6 months, she'll be like, maybe I should look into this more.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, most women naturally, like, you wouldn't use a device like this without going, wonder how that works. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you've invested money into it, right? And you really, you want to trust it, you want to use it for a long time.
Especially
And
if you invest the money in it. Yeah.
yeah, most women are, you get to the point where you like, okay, I'm going to use this, I'm going to learn about it. And yeah, most women are like, well, how's this work? Okay, that's really cool. They may never even learn anything before, except in like when they were 13 in biology class and they've forgotten it, right? And it really does become something where they makes them curious, because we're human and we're curious, right? You're never, I mean, yeah, I guess some of us might, you switch on the TV, you don't always wonder how a TV works, right? Or you switch on a computer and you don't always wonder. But I think when you're doing something that it's still intimate, even though it's technology, and it's something that's like you're doing every day and it becomes a habit, then you want to understand what and why and how, right?
Well, so I'm aware that we're kind of going over time, and so I have a couple questions about the lady comp and the Daysy. So one of the questions I'd ask is for a woman who's listening, and maybe she is listening because the title of the podcast said lady comp, and she uses the lady comp. Or she just started, or she's thinking about using it, and she really
Yeah.
doesn't have that much knowledge besides that of her body. So what would you want to tell her when she's using it or when she's thinking about using it?
Oh, in
Like,
in what sense?
how would you, I guess, how would you encourage her to use it? Would you encourage her to just take it for what it is and just do the temperature or whatever? Or how would you encourage her to take it as kind of the first step on her journey to learning more about her body?
Well, I think the first point that's necessary is to understand that you're taking your basal body temperature, what that is, and how that fits into your fertility cycle. So that is one sign of your fertility, and therefore it's also a sign that can be changed by different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really important. And that information is always something that's conveyed to anybody who uses these devices. I know that, even though I don't work on the customer service side, that could be, your sleep condition or your alcohol intake, or other drugs you may have used, or stress, or do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of, and that it's not basic really. It's kind of complicated, but it's sometimes is like something you don't think about, and then once you start thinking about it, you start realizing that your cycle's like a part of you, and it's a holistic thing, and you start to think about it as like a something that you need to kind of examine as a process in your body, that changes and fluctuates, and that's part of what you're doing by taking it every day, putting more temperatures into the device and the way that it works, and knowing that sometimes the readings won't be able to be used because of different factors. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like something that technologically, like, you immediately come up against, you immediately realize and find out, because if you've never known anything before about fertility awareness, you'll be like, well, why am I getting so many yellow days, or why am I getting so many red days, or why did I only get this many green days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you enter into that conversation, right? And sometimes it's because you're coming off the pill, or sometimes it's because of different things that are going on in your life, or maybe you'll find out that you have PCOS, or different things that are going on. So it's kind of you can't. It's almost it's not impossible to just do it and not think about it, but I think early on it's kind of naturally part of the process, and it's good to think like that, right? Because it makes you start thinking holistically about it.
Okay. Well, and some final questions for the day. So I don't remember how you answered these the first time. I'm not sure if I asked the exact same questions. But what would you say is one of the most common myths, or the most common myth or misconception about fertility awareness that you would want to see corrected?
I think that it's anti-sex. I get really bored of that. I think a lot of people think it's like they put it in like this anti-sex box, which is like they think it's only for women who don't really want to have a lot of sex or are kind of prudish or are not really that interested in sex, right? Because we've come to associate using the pill as like liberation and freedom and like being able to have spontaneous sex whenever you want and all this stuff, right? And I think that's kind of one of the psychological barriers that we didn't mention, which is that, people think it's going to change their sex lives and they're not
For
going
the
to.
worse, for the worse, of
Yep,
course. Yeah.
for the worse. I think that's probably what I would say. And people think that even though like we all kind of know and accept that the pill ruins your libido and all those things, still hard to get past that. I think it's maybe the Catholic connection. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that
Yeah.
comes from.
Yeah, I think the hang up is around like knowing
And
that
any
there are
mention
days
of
that
like
you may be,
abstinence.
yeah, exactly. Days that you may be
Yes.
unavailable for sex may
Yeah.
is a problem. Okay. And given that we spent the our time together today talking about tech and fertility awareness tech, what would you say is one of the biggest myths about tech, especially coming like from fertility awareness educators who are listening, or people in this world like myself who come at this with a very like, these devices don't work, they're the rhythm method, they're predictive, and what would you say, I guess, to those perspectives like myself?
Um, that's interesting. There's a lot, I think, so it's hard to pick
Yeah,
just
pick one.
one thing. And you mentioned quite a few of them there
Sorry.
already. I think I think that obviously that it doesn't work is a big one. And I understand where that comes from because there is a lot of tech out there that hasn't really been independently tested and that isn't a certified medical device
Mm,
and isn't checked yearly for what it's claiming to do and kind of makes sort of half-assed claims about being possibly used for birth control but shouldn't really be. And, there's a lot of that. And also, it's very new. And we are rightfully, to a lot of people, they see things as very new and they're rightfully suspicious of that too. And that makes sense. And we should be. But I think, yeah, I think that it doesn't work. And probably the one that we've talked about most, really, though, which is um, that it's not working in the same field as fertility awareness, that it's somehow anti that rather
mm-hmm.
than rather than a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
People see it as like a conflicting thing, a conflicting movement, a conflicting industry, or whatever you want to call it. When they see it as something that's also about the contrition between that and what fertility awareness educators want fertility awareness to be about, and that it's somehow working against the goal rather than the fact that I think at least the people I know who I speak with most often are um, working towards the same goal actually,
Mm-hmm.
and have and don't want to see um, and want to see more women understand and be more connected with their bodies. And I can't say I'm not speaking for everybody in the fertility tech world because I've met some people who really aren't like that. I won't name names, but, but the people that I know are coming from that place, and I think that it's really a struggle that to win people over in a way. And, it's conversation. The thing is it's conversation to conversation. It's conversations like this. It's like the conversation like I had with Laura Brydon, and we're doing this live Q&A, and she loves the idea of technology for a lot of different reasons. And, she's really interested in it as an option for people for whom it would be right. And she knows that some of her clients, they are totally going to be happy with charting just with an app and doing it all themselves. And she knows some people are not, and that some people this something like Daysy would be right for them.
Mm-hmm.
But really it's from my point of view, I've just been talking about Daysy and things for like a few months now, and it's really just working out. It's conversation to conversation, and people just going, so, and the nice thing for me is that I'm coming from a place where I did all that thinking work too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just gonna, I have my integrity, so I'm not just gonna be like, oh,
and now I'm with Daysy, and I haven't given it any thought.
No, I've given it years of thought. Believe me, years of different points of evolving basically my thinking and my take and my perspective, and so I know where people are coming from. I know exactly why people have worries, but I think at least the people I know really have the same goal.
Well, and I think that's it's really, really reassuring and comforting and really interesting as well to really get at that perspective that we're actually on the same team and we're playing the game, if you want to call it that, in different ways, but we're actually working for the same goal. I think that that's a really interesting and important point. So final question.
Stronger together.
Yes,
We're
exactly.
stronger together than apart because we have a big enemy.
Yeah.
That enemy is huge, and that enemy will swallow everything and anything.
Yeah, yeah. And I like what you're saying as to kind of, it's another option to offer women kind of on the other side, on the non-hormonal side, because like you're saying, we're facing this really real IUD push scenario. Because a lot of women are not having a good experience on the birth control pill. And so it would seem like, okay, well, we can't keep pushing that on women because they're not really liking it. So let's try this one. And this is going to be the thing. So yeah. So final question of the day, for a woman who's currently on the pill, but knows that she wants to have a baby in the next 2 to 3 years, but is not ready now. And maybe she doesn't feel like she has a lot of options. What advice, if any, would you give to her?
Did you say someone who's currently on or not on the pill?
Currently on.
Oh, I always say come off. I'm the kind of age where everybody always that's where everybody's at, that I know pretty much. And I actually have two very friends that I've known since school who are in the situation, and one of them, bless her, was like, oh, Holly, I didn't want to read your book until I came off the pill.
Oh, like, yeah. I can understand that though. Like, yeah, it would be hard to read when you're on it.
Yeah, she was like, I didn't want to read it while I was on the pill in case I wanted to come off it and I wasn't in the right place with my relationship to come off it. But now I want to have a baby. I'm going to read it and I'm going to come off it. And I'm like, please come off it for longer than, before you start trying. Just, I think it's important, where you're at and you don't get disappointed. And I think personally, I just like the idea of being completely free of it before you get pregnant. So, but yeah, I have that very real conversation all the time.
Yeah. Well, Holly, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we had this conversation today.
Me too.
It was a lot of fun, and it was, I was excited about it, and I was really excited to see where it would go, because I knew in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to not ask the questions I want to ask, and I'm not going to not share my kind of oppositional perspective. And so I thought it was a really great conversation that we had. So
yeah, and I'm so glad that you had me on, and it's very nice to hear that you said that you wouldn't have had this conversation with a lot of people, but you had it with me. That means a lot to me. It really does. It means a lot to me. So
well, it's the truth, because I'm coming from that perspective, right? Like, and I really appreciate that you're stretching me. You know what I mean? Like, my resistant self is like, man, Holly, I can see your point. You're
Well, and I
stretching
wanted
me.
that conversation with you too, because it's important when we do these things that we always test ourselves and our thinking and where we're at. And I need to hear all these questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. So for the listeners then who want to get in touch with you or want to read your book or just kind of learn more about your work or read some more of the work that you're doing,
Mm.
because I always love and share your articles because you just have a great perspective. So, anyways, how can our listeners find out more about you or get in touch with you?
It's probably best now to just go to the Facebook page for Sweetening the Pill. Just type in Sweetening the Pill. It will come up. The image is like the front cover of my book, the pink cover. So that's the group. And I share a lot of different stuff, not just my own stuff, articles I find. We have kind of a lot of interesting conversations on there. There's a lot of different people who follow that page from a lot of different walks of this life. So it's a good place to go and learn more and ask questions.
Okay, perfect. So we'll link to that in the show notes for today. So thank you again, Holly. It was so great talking to you, and I'm really happy that I had you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much too.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode with Holly, so head over to the show notes page and let me know what you found most helpful from today's show. So you'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/63, so the number 63. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S, on Twitter at Fertile Friday, and if you enjoyed what you heard today, and you're wanting to learn more about the fertility awareness method, head over to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the Fertility Friday Fertility Awareness Facebook group. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it in iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. Of course, leave an honest review, but I really appreciate you taking the time to let me know how I'm doing. And I do read all of the reviews. And if you do have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, shoot me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. I appreciate all of you so much for taking time to tune into the podcast, wherever you're doing, for allowing me to be part of your day and for supporting the show. So thank you so much for listening. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.